my vision, every desire. Keep for your glory, my soul inspired. And with your perfection and your holy love, flooding my pathway with light from above. And fill all my vision, Savior divine, till with your glory my spirit shall shine. And fill all my vision, that all may see your holy image reflected in me, reflected in me. Good evening. My name is Jason Goodson.
And I'm Johnny Taylor.
This is Coffee and Conversations, November 6, 2013. It's Wednesday. It is around 11 p.m.
A little late at night.
We started today with our high temperature of around 70 degrees and ended the day with its low is like 20 degrees cooler almost. 53 when I left the house a little earlier tonight.
Oh, it's 45 now.
Oh, my goodness. And I sound worse than I feel. This past week, I had a bit of a bout with, I've had sinus infections before in the past and never, I've had some bad ones, but man, this one kind of just punched me and knocked me to my rear end. And
yeah, he sounds good compared to what he sounded when he called me last week.
Yeah, when I called him last week, I couldn't hardly speak. So I kind of set out, and so slowly, I don't know how I made it through Friday night, the football game, but I had just the right medicines in me and was able to make it through our last home game for football, and it was fun. And I just want to say that's been so awesome to do this year, and I just have loved every second of it. To be able to announce football games on Friday nights in Texas, no matter what level it is, or small high school, big high school, doesn't matter. It was pretty freaking awesome to be able to do it. So that's been fun. And everything. So I'm a little tired on top of that to go along with this coming out of the sickness. And so I'm doing a lot better than I was last week, though. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Yeah. I probably needed the rest last week because starting Thursday, I hit a long weekend of stuff. I was telling Jason by Sunday afternoon, I had taken over 1,000 pictures in 4 days. And that's not just sitting snapping pictures at one spot. You're looking for good pictures.
Right. Right.
I was tired by Monday.
Man, there's been some crazy things going on. I know this is kind of random, but you think about the coach of the Broncos having the heart valve replacement.
Yep.
And then the Texans coach the other night.
That was strange.
At halftime, just falls out on the sideline with what was it called? A warning stroke is what they called it.
I don't know. I never did hear.
And then the whole Miami situation, those guys down there, people about to lose their jobs over that. And it's just been crazy, huh? I think.
A strange week.
Strange week, nonetheless, yes. But never mind that, the whole thing of just, I'm a sports guy in general. I love sports just because I think I like the team aspect of what sports provides and not having to do everything on your own. And anyways, football is that sport because you don't have a team playing together, and it really shows up at the end. And it's just interesting how man's depravity shows up and all that, and in everyday life and situations. But especially when it's on display and it doesn't get put on display very much. So, which kind of, tonight it's been, our conversation tonight really is, it's almost, I really feel like it's one of those great reminder conversations that we need to have.
Yeah. Stuff we've covered before, but
it's
maybe from a little different direction, but.
So we got here tonight, just having a conversation with JT about, just how we look at our sin and different things like that. And I just think it all comes down to a point. We mentioned the last several podcasts. We mentioned the word yashab, which talks about dwelling, about intimacy. We talked about living in the shadow of the camel last week, which was what I think is a really cool picture of us being restful in Christ, and just having that whole picture of being resting in your lover. I mean, the lover of your soul, the God who created you, and it's just such a beautiful picture of intimacy with God. So I think we're going to just throw out some basic questions to start the podcast for you tonight.
And the thing we want you to do is get a pen and a piece of paper, or you can type them up on your computer, whichever one you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually go copy them from the post on the Facebook page.
That's right.
That I put out there a minute ago. But we want you to take some time, pause the podcast. Don't keep on listening until you've answered these questions. We ask you to do that for us. Not that you're going to give us the answers. The answers are for you alone.
Right.
But we want you to take some time and do this before you listen to the rest of the podcast. And we will name off the questions here.
All right.
For you. If you've got you can pause, or get your pen and paper, come back, and then write down the questions, and then pause again.
Number 1, what do you think about yourself? Number 2, how do you feel about yourself? Number 3, what do you think others feel about you? Number 4, if God took on physical form and walked in the door, would you feel comfortable enough to have a cup of coffee with him? If so, why? If not, why?
Yeah, and what we said on the post there was, we're not looking for a right answer here.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking for a spiritual answer. We're looking for what's true about you.
Right.
And I would say really being honest with yourself about these questions is an extremely important thing.
Right.
So anyway, hit pause now and go answer and think about the questions. Take as much time as you need. We'll be here when you come back. Okay, you're back. We trust that you paused and that you have taken some time to answer those questions and have been honest with yourself. Like we said, we don't want the answers. It's just for you.
That's right.
And hopefully what we're going to talk about now over the next little bit, maybe give some insight into the answers you've written down, and maybe a little glimpse of God's love for us.
I think that's really important. I think all these questions can really honestly be answered from the view of God's love for you.
Yeah.
Such an important aspect of how we view certain questions, and specifically these questions. And I think we talked about this before, but one of the greatest, greatest things that I've seen done, I know, with students and having that table set up with the coffee cup and watching them watching those few people who went up there that night and just really sat down and with this ever present reality that it was okay to have a conversation with God, you know. Boy, if there's, you know, and I've said this before, I'm very relational. Love having relationships with people. And it's very rare on the times that we don't pursue relationships with other people. But I know a large part of my life is feeding off of those relationships with other people. And really, I really get to know the God in somebody else really well through those relationships. And, and I really, and literally, whether you're like our friend Ross, who sits on the back porch in the morning and enjoys his coffee and alone time, or you're like me in the mornings, they're surrounded by noise and kids. And it's, I find myself many occasions being just as restful in that situation as I would be on the back porch, you know, in that situation as well. And there are times where I do relish the moments of quietness to be able to go and look at different questions like this. You know, because how important is it to think, what do you think about yourself in general? I mean, if we answer that question and really focus in on what it's saying, I mean, that's how you see yourself and how you think about yourself and how you feel about yourself is so important.
And I think most of us, most of the time, ignore that.
Right.
We try to ignore it because we don't really want to look. We don't want to dive into those feelings and those thoughts a lot of the time. So we just ignore it.
A lot of times you don't see you ignore it and because you look and you see how really on the deep inside of you, because I know that if I could, you know, if I open up the closet and I look inside and I'm like, eesh, there's a lot of that comes out in there with those thinking about myself and how I feel about myself. I know that over the years, pursuing this relationship with God and intimacy, my feelings have changed since the times where I've beat myself up over these questions to the point of now just resting in where God has me. In the midst of these questions. And I still, you know what I still fight with in reading these questions, just looking at them here, is what other people think about me. I still wrestle deep down to the core of who I am. What do other people really think about me?
And it's one of the hardest things because we can put such a spiritual spin on that question.
Man, yeah.
Oh, I got to be a perfect example.
Exactly.
I'm going to make people hate God. That's what we really think.
Excuse me.
Oh,
I'm gonna try not to get laughed up because if I do, I'll lose it.
That brings to mind something we're going to get into a little bit later in the podcast, but just we'll make people hate God.
Oh man,
I want to jump. I'm kind of all over the place here tonight.
That's fine.
Just a thought that struck me a while ago. Jason was talking about intimate relationships, friends, and stuff. And I don't think I've ever thought about it this way, but 2 Corinthians 4:11.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For we who live are always delivered to death for Jesus' sake, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. And you're like, what does that have to do with intimate relationships? Well, if one of our prayers is we want to see Jesus, where did that just say he was going to manifest himself?
Yeah. In our mortal flesh, yeah.
So if we don't have some intimate relationships, some intimate friends, and it's pretty much, it's impossible to be intimate with everybody.
Yeah, right.
But if you don't have at least a close friend or two, that's one of the places you miss out on seeing Jesus.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That he may be manifested in our bodies, our mortal bodies.
Look, JT, and of course, my relationship with JT as somebody who follows Christ, is so key to not only daily living, but it's like, it's key to to helping me. I mean, there's so many times where I've sat with JT and just a few things that's been said in the conversation just brings back reminders about how God really feels about me. What is his, how he feels about us as people. But just, and a lot of times that manifests itself in just conversation.
Yeah.
Whether it's, and it could be a conversation about anything.
Yeah.
I mean, and I could, 9 times out of 10, with our conversations with one another, a lot of times it doesn't always lead to the spiritual, but it does for a majority part of our time. And and I don't even know that sometimes we even looking for it. It just happens.
It becomes, it's such a part of who we are.
Right. And I hope that, how you've been raised or whatever has gone on in the past of your life, if you have the ability and the opportunity, and I think we all have that ability and all have that opportunity to pursue that type of relationship and really get to a point in your life where you're not scared to sit down with somebody else.
Yeah. And
just really open up about who you are and really come to, terms with, the inside.
Yeah.
I think, and I think of, and I'm just going to name a few names and people, you may know these people, you may not know these people, but, and I think of just recently, and I'm just thinking recently here, locally, Jim or Ross, those 2 guys right there.
Yeah.
I think of outside of family, even for me, and Justin being one of those guys. But I think about Mississippi. I think about Stu. I think about Andy. I think about John. I think about Larry. I think about Joe. I think about, I've just got names and names and names of these people that we may not be able to see them all the time, but man, we could sit down with them and it'd be like we just left the conversation yesterday from 6 years ago, and so those relationships are very dear and very important to us in that. And I just really want to camp out on this last question for a few moments. I love this last question. And I think this last question is really if God took on physical form and walked in the door, would you feel comfortable enough to have a cup of coffee with him and just be yourself and conversate with God over coffee, and I'm just talking about life and how you answered the first 3 questions is going to
be the difference in how you answer the last one.
Absolutely. Right.
Because the first 3 are very telling about what you think God thinks about you.
Right. A lot of times we see, how we think and feel about ourselves, especially when it comes to, let's just use sin, as the catalyst there.
Yeah.
And, the more I sin, the more I drive myself away from God is the mentality of people.
Yeah.
So in other words, people's sin has the ability to wedge God and keep him from us.
Yeah.
And that is one of the scary things about life that we grow up in thinking, because I know that, even having conversation with people, they have and we've talked about this before, but having the ability to let go of whatever that comment is, to think that our sin is more powerful than God's grace and love and mercy over us, that he's not big enough to handle that sin.
Yeah.
That he can't, so.
And that brings us, how do you feel about yourself? Which is what you think about yourself has pretty much everything to do with how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of beating up in that question right there.
Oh, it's like.
Yeah. There's a lot of people just punching self in the face.
Because usually how we feel about ourselves is based on how well we perform.
Right. Right.
It's everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring it to our spiritual life. We bring the ways of the world to our spiritual life, which is a sad thing. And if you go back and listen, quite a few podcasts ago, the ways of the world.
Well,
man, it's been a long time ago.
It has been, isn't it?
Oh, well over 2 years.
Goodness.
Anyway. Oh, what we feel about it. What you feel about yourself. I wonder, I mean, I sit here and I think, I wonder, were you able to be honest with yourself about that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, could you really get gut level?
Right.
And even consider the whys of why you feel however you feel about yourself?
Those are interesting questions. Those are real interesting questions. Because, I mean, man, that's just scary. And talk about being scary. That's a scary in and of itself.
Oh,
right
all these questions are scary. I could just imagine everybody like, oh, I've got to answer these. I don't think I'll listen today. What do you think others feel about you? Most of us let this question drive and guide our lives.
Right.
Which is a sad thing. It's a sad thing.
Yeah. I catch myself on this one quite a bit.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
I think constantly. The guilt trip.
True. I hate that. I hate that, man.
It's that. There's no life in it.
There isn't at all.
No life at all. Only stress and gnashing of teeth.
Man. I want to,
My question is, do you really think what other people think about you has anything to do with what God thinks about you?
Right. That's the mentality of humans, though. They'll put a human perspective on God and make him out to be like us.
Oh yeah.
In these things, because we'll have this same mentality that he must think the same way I do about myself in this situation, or he must think like this other person thinks about me. Oh, I didn't perform very well in this, so he thinks like that.
He thinks like the pastor thinks about me.
Yes.
Oh, he preached a sermon on tithing this week. I didn't tithe enough.
Yeah, I got hammered. In church this week.
That must be what God thinks about me.
That's right. Oh man, that hit me to the core, right?
Oh.
Oh.
And that comes to the fourth one, because if that's how God thinks about you,
sitting down with coffee is not going to be too much of a fun process.
It's not going to be a fun thought or comfortable. How many times have people tried to guilt you with, well, if Jesus was standing here, what would you do?
Oh, man.
That's probably that statement just makes my blood boil. Because if your only response to God is out of guilt,
right,
you might as well not respond at all.
Mm-hmm.
If it isn't out of love for God, 1 Corinthians 13 makes it very clear.
Right.
It's absolutely worthless.
Mm-hmm.
If it's out of love, you're not looking for brownie points. If it's out of fear or guilt, it ain't going to earn you none.
Right.
See, there ain't no brownie points. There's only the cross.
There's only the cross.
You can't earn brownie points.
Man, it's so true. That is so true. If you can't, listen, that just reminds me, if you can't, Romans 6 talks about us identifying ourselves with the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
It talks about being identified in that. If you can't You know, you talk about coming to terms with self on that issue. There's a big, huge marker in these questions, even about that.
Yeah.
You can't, like, I think one of the things that will heal you from the beating up and all those things that draw you in and cause you to think those bad things about yourself, you know, is being identified with that. The death, burial, and resurrection of Christ.
Yeah.
Not being seated in yourself anymore, not walking in yourself, not being, I think if you look at the perspective of the cross and that, what it's done for us and what it's given us access to.
Yeah.
It just builds us up to be able to put us in a place to be comfortable enough to sit down and enjoy God the way that He intended for us to enjoy Him.
Yeah. I was just coming back to, you know, how we think God is toward us is going to dictate whether we have intimate relationships with others or how those relationships go.
Right, right.
Because I was just thinking about this is not about I don't want a sissy relationship of you're okay, I'm okay. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about friends who say, I will go to hell with you in the midst of your junk.
Right.
And all of that mess that you have on the inside, I'm there. And
right.
I'm okay with that.
Right.
Knowing that we're each other messed up. That's intimate friendship there. And being able to come to God, because He knows us better even than we know ourselves.
Right.
But being able to come to God in the midst of knowing all of this here on this inside is all this mess, and being perfectly okay with that in front of God. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Should I make my statement that's going to get me in trouble here?
I think so.
It struck me as we were thinking earlier about, you know, if God showed up in the physical right here, would you feel comfortable sitting down and having just an intimate cup of coffee with him? Conversation.
Right.
Would you sit there and look him in his eyes? Could you do that? And the thought struck me, and I wrote it down, that there's only one thing that can make me uncomfortable with him. And that's my pride. That would be the only reason I would be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Not because I have pride, but because of my pride.
Because of your pride.
And what I mean by that is my pride in thinking that I can do anything to make myself worthy to be in His presence, worthy to be loved. That's the only place that's the only place an uneasiness with Jesus will ever come from.
Right.
And that's all about me.
Right.
That's all about me thinking I can do something about this mess inside.
Wow.
The only thing that can make you uncomfortable in the presence of Jesus is your pride.
That's interesting. I've got an illustration of a conversation, but without mentioning names, I've sat down with lunch with a buddy of mine from high school, and probably 5 to 6 years ago, here locally, and sat down and had lunch. And really, he sat down with me and just told me about how God had started moving in his life and transforming all this stuff. And as soon as JT, remember this, I remember opening up and saying, all right, before we go any further here, I just sort of displayed to him what I dealt with, what my struggles were. As soon as I opened that door up to that part of me, that if he's comfortable enough with this, he'll be comfortable enough with being able to sit down and pursue this further. And I'm talking conversation. As soon as I laid that stuff out on the table, took a different direction, because all of a sudden the elephant was out in the room. All of a sudden,
You don't want to know that.
It didn't want, and all of a sudden it was as if, wow, the realness of what that just happened is kind of where it went. That just happened. And I think sometimes, people are afraid to extend themselves to a certain extent with what they deal with other people, based on feeling, I don't know if I could lay that out on the table, I could hear, but understanding this is getting to that point in your relationship and understanding with God that no matter what it is, it's on the inside. You sat down at that table just as you are.
Yeah.
And being okay with knowing that God knows every intimate detail about you already. He already knows this stuff.
Yeah, it's not like
you're surprised by your sin.
You think about the prodigal son. The father knew exactly what he'd been off doing.
Oh, such a good, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
No, he's still a son.
Yeah.
Think about this. Let's go back through the questions. What do you think about yourself? Only thing that make you think bad about yourself is your pride.
Right.
How do you feel about yourself? Only thing that make you feel bad about yourself? Your pride. What do you think others feel about you? The only thing that can make you worry about that is your pride. And the only thing that can make you uncomfortable in the presence of Jesus is your pride. No wonder it's an abomination to God.
Right.
Because it keeps us from everything that's life.
Right.
Our pride.
Right.
Thinking we can do anything.
Right.
About our condition.
Right. That's good, man.
That's serious
That's
stuff. Serious stuff. And it's so hard to let go of what other people think about you. Especially in spiritual matters.
Right.
That's the hardest.
Right.
We think we've made it spiritually because, I'm more concerned about what other people think about me spiritually than anything else. No, that's just more pride. Just a different form.
Or it shows up in some strange ways.
One thing matters. What God thinks about us. And he thinks about us based on the cross.
Yeah.
Doesn't not know. The cross doesn't hide who we are from God.
Right.
It makes who we are okay with God.
Right. Right.
With nothing in between.
Right. That leads right into this verse. It's really good. These verses in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 10, 19 through 23. That's some really good stuff.
Yeah.
Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he consecrated for us through the veil, that is his flesh. And having a high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart. Didn't say in the sense of pride, did it?
Yeah.
I love that. That's good. It says, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of what? Faith. Having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. So let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is what? Faithful. That's so good, man.
God made the promise.
Yeah.
Our promises are useless. God made the promise. And that having boldness to enter the holiest of holies. That's the presence of God. The presence of God. God himself lives here. That is the holiest of holies. But having the boldness to enjoy and be comfortable and live. Do you have? That's my question today. Are you bold enough to live? Are you going to live in your pride? Which one you want? Which one would be more favorable here? I'm going to be bold and I'm going to live in the holiness of God. Has nothing to do with my performance. It has to do with God's holiness.
Yeah.
It says he consecrated. I can't pronounce it.
Yeah.
It says he did it though.
Yeah.
Through the veil. That is his flesh.
Right.
His flesh conquered it.
There's, man.
Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith. Doesn't look like I could draw near. Well, it doesn't really matter what it looks like.
Yeah, because our hearts have been sprinkled from an evil conscience, it says.
And our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast. Anchor to our soul.
Right.
What's that verse?
Hebrews 6, 18, 13.
We have this as an anchor to our soul.
Yeah.
Can you find that?
I can.
Such a good verse. There's a song about that.
Yeah, sure is. Good one.
Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised. Not about our wavering or our promises wavering. It's that we hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful.
Yeah, 6:18 and 19 here. It says, by two immutable things in which it's impossible for God to lie, we may have strong consolation who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us.
Refuge.
Yep.
Dwelling.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't think about that.
It's the same word.
The same is, yeah. This hope we have is an anchor to the soul, both sure and steadfast, in which enters the presence behind the veil, which were there is a forerunner who has entered even us, even Jesus, having a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. This hope we have of an anchor to the soul, both sure and steadfast.
Because
enters the presence behind the veil.
The presence in the holiest of holies.
Yep.
An anchor to our soul. Fires me up. So.
Here, and two, that verse is so good, and we, you have the ability, as you are. We're talking about, you talked about John earlier, the disciple, the beloved disciple.
Yeah, let's look at being comfortable in the presence of Jesus.
And this is talking about being comfortable in a moment where there wasn't too much comfort going on in the room.
No.
Based on what was being said and what was being talked about. Who's betrayed Jesus here at this point?
Yeah.
All right. Here's all of a sudden, this is what we're in the midst of here.
Yep.
At the supper, at the Last Supper. So then the disciples, verse 22, is it 13? Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
John 13:22.
Yep.
Then the disciples looked at one another perplexed about whom he spoke. And now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. Verse 24, Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. Then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, Lord, who is it? Then Jesus, he said, it is he. I shall give the piece of bread, and dipped it. So in the midst of this whole scene where Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, has done the deed, he's already made the process, he's already made it happen, but all these guys are in the midst of this flare, and here John is leaning in, getting close, thinking at that point in time, what? It could have been him, right?
Yeah.
But he still was comfortable enough to be able to move in and have the ability to even ask.
Yeah. But just that whole scene of the eating a meal in the presence of God.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding Jesus' love for him. So, what's the old verses about choose you this day?
Yeah.
Good or evil? Good that you may live.
Oh, those are good verses. That's Deuteronomy.
So, while he's looking at it, choose you this day. You're going to hold on to the illusion of your control and your pride, thinking you can do it? Or are you going to dwell? Seek refuge.
Just trying to remember here. The very end.
I think it seemed like Nehemiah said it one time. It's more than once, different places in the Old Testament. Today I set before you life and death. I think Joshua may have said it once. It's a serious things.
I'll get close, JT.
And it's sad when we'll hold on to an illusion till it kills us.
Here it is. 30. Deuteronomy 30. I'll start in 16. He says, in that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, his statutes, his judgments, that you may live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess.
Where you go to dwell.
Yep. 17, but if your heart turns away so that you do not hear and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them. Verse 18, I announce to you today that you shall surely perish. For you shall not prolong your days in the land which you cross over the Jordan and go in to possess. I call heaven and earth as witness today against you, so that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may obey his voice, that you may cling to him, for he is your life and length of your days, and that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to give them.
All fits together. Repeats the same thing over and over again. Cling to him.
Yeah.
Cling to him. Cling to him. When we see him face to face, we'll be like him.
Yep. 1 John 3.
If you're afraid to look him in the eyes,
It's good stuff. Well, I believe the purpose is just to help confront and deal with the ability to enjoy God and just being yourself in his presence.
Being all right with yourself.
Yeah.
Being all right with what others think about you. But most of all, accepting that you're accepted in the beloved.
That's good.
That God welcomes you into the holiest of holies, which you're already there. It's just a matter if you want to dwell there or not. What was it we talked about last time? But something about you can be somewhere but not be dwelling.
Oh, we were talking about in the shadow.
Yeah.
Talking about resting in the shadow and not being there but not dwelling there.
Yeah.
How important it is to, not only to live, because we get, the point is that the man hid it from the sun in the shadow of the camel.
Yeah. To
find rest.
Yeah.
Find refuge, to find a place to breathe for a moment. And living your life in that position is more than just taking a few moments to sit down and get a quick break. It's about living there.
Yeah. Well, I think we pretty well covered it. Not sure quite what we covered because we didn't have any clue what we were going to do when we showed up today. But God's faithful. Yeshua. Dwell. Be intimate. Be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about everything being right and correct, but be okay.
Mm.